Krishna Rakshama Oh Krishna 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 Rakshama Krishna 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 Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rakshama Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rakshama Krishna Kesava Krishna Kesava Krishna Kesava Pranimam Krishna Kesava Krishna Kesava Krishna Kesava Pranimam Krishna 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 Harimam Krishna 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 Harimam Jaya Guru Nitai Jaya Guru Nitai Guru Nitai Jaya Guru Nitai Jaya Guru Nitai Guru Nitai Jaya Radha Radha Kanta Radha Radha Kanta Radhe Radha Kanta Radha Kanta Radhe Radha Radha Kanta Radha Radha Kanta Radhe Radha Radha Kanta Radha Radha Kanta Radhe Haribo 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo Haribo Nam Shivaya Paramaham Parivrata Acharya Spakari Sutta Srimad Divine Grace Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Grandhara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the divine lotus feet of Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nastaprayeshu Abhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9. Text number 44. Please repeat. Tasma idam Bhagavatam Puranam Dasa Lakshanam Proktam Bhagavata Praha Rita Putraya Buddha Krit Tasmaridam Bhagavatam Puranam Dasalakshanam Proktam Bhagavata Praha Krita Putraya Buddha Krit Tasmaridam Bhagavatam Puranam Dasalakshanam Proktam Bhagavata Praha Krita Putraya Buddha Krit Tasmaridam Bhagavatam Puranam Dasalakshanam Proktam Bhagavata Praha Krita Putraya Buddha Krit
Tasmaridam Bhagavatam
Puranam Dasalakshanam
Proktam Bhagavata Praha Kritaha Putraya Bhuta Krit
Tasmaidam Bhagavatam Puranam Dasalakshanam Proktam Bhagavata Praha Krita Putraya Bhuta Krit Tasmaidam
Bhagavatam
Puranam
Dasalakshanam
Proktam
Bhagavata Praha Krita Putraya Bhuta Krit Tasmaridam Bhagavatam Puranam Dasalakshanam Proktam Bhagavata Praha Krita Putraya Bhuta Krit Tasmaridam Bhagavatam Puranam Dasalakshanam Proktam Bhagavata Praha Krita Putraya Bhuta Krit Tasmaridam Bhagavatam Puranam Dasalakshanam Proktam Bhagavata Praha Krita Putraya Bhuta Krit Tasmaridam Bhagavatam Puranam Dasalakshanam Proktam Bhagavata Praha Krita Putraya Bhuta Krit Tasmaridam Bhagavatam Puranam Dasalakshanam
Proktam Bhagavata Praha
Proktam Bhagavata Praha
Pita Putraya Bhutakrit
Pita Putraya Bhutakrit. Anyone else? Okay. Before I forget, Maharani, there's a family coming on, possibly coming on Saturday. They want to come. If they would like to buy some paneer, if you have some paneer stuff. So if you get that ready for them on Saturday. Okay. Tasmai. Thereupon. Idam. This. Bhagavatam. The glories of the Lord.
The glories of the Lord.
Or the science of the Lord.
Or the science of the Lord.
Puranam.
Puranam.
Vedic supplement.
Vedic supplements.
Dasalakshanam.
Dasalakshanam.
10 characteristics.
10 characteristics.
Proktam.
Proktam.
Describe.
Describe.
Bhagavata.
Bhagavata.
By the personality of Godhead.
Personality of Godhead.
Raha.
Raha.
Set.
Set.
Pitaha.
Pita.
Pritaha.
Prita.
In satisfaction.
In satisfaction.
Putraya.
Putraya.
Onto the Son.
Unto the Son.
Bhutakrit.
Bhagavatam.
The creator of the universe.
The creator of the universe.
Translation. Please repeat. Thereupon.
Thereupon.
The supplementary.
The supplementary.
Vedic literature.
Vedic literature.
Srimad Bhagavatam.
Srimad Bhagavatam.
Which was described
Which is described.
by the personality of Godhead.
Personality of Godhead.
In which contains 10 characteristics.
Which contains 10 characteristics.
Was told with satisfaction
Was told with satisfaction.
by the Father,
And the Father.
Brahma,
Brahma.
to his son Narada.
To his son Narada.
Thereupon the supplementary Vedic literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, which was described by the personality of Godhead and which contains 10 characteristics, was told with satisfaction by the Father, Brahma, to his son Narada. Srila Prabhupada's divine purport. Although the Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken in 4 verses, it had 10 characteristics, which will be explained in the next chapter. In the 4 verses, it is first said that the Lord existed before the creation, and thus the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam includes the Vedanta aphorism Janmad Yasha. Janmad Yasha is the beginning. Yet the 4 verses in which it is said that the Lord is the root of everything that be, beginning from the creation up to the supreme abode of the Lord, naturally explain the 10 characteristics. One should not misunderstand by wrong interpretation that the Lord spoke only 4 verses, and that therefore all the rest of the 17,994 verses are useless. The 10 characteristics, as will be explained in the next chapter, require so many verses just to explain them properly. Brahmaji had also advised Narada previously that he should expand the idea he had heard from Brahmaji. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed this to Srila Rupa Goswami in a nutshell. But the disciple, Rupa Goswami, expanded this very elaborately. And the same subject was further expanded by Jiva Goswami, and even further by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura. We are just trying to follow in the footsteps of all these authorities. So Srimad Bhagavatam is not like ordinary fiction or mundane literature. It is unlimited in strength. And however one may expand it according to one's own ability, Bhagavatam still cannot be finished by any such expansion. Srimad Bhagavatam, being the sound representation of the Lord, is simultaneously explained in 4 verses and in 4 billion verses, all the same. And as much as the Lord is smaller than the atom and bigger than the unlimited sky, such is the potency of Srimad Bhagavatam. The beautiful story of the personality of God. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport to the 44th verse, 9th chapter, 2nd canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada ki. Tasmadidam Bhagavatam Puranam Dasalakshanam Proktam Bhagavata Praha Krita Putraya Bhuta Krit. Thereupon the supplementary Vedic literature Srimad Bhagavatam, which was described by the personality of Godhead and which contains 10 characteristics, was told with satisfaction by the Father, Brahma, to his son, Narada. Srila Prabhupada, I offer my respectful obeisances to Srila Prabhupada, who has opened my eyes, although they were shut very densely with the mode of ignorance. When will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who has established within the material world the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, give me shelter under his lotus feet? Srila Prabhupada ki. So perhaps the most obvious, if one was researching to say something further on the verse and Srila Prabhupada's purport, obviously one would want to describe the Dasa Lakshana, or 10 characteristics of the Srimad Bhagavatam. But I'll just touch upon that real briefly. Other things that entered my mind, and I didn't take the time, didn't have the time to jot it all down. So I decided that there was so much I was just going to spontaneously give the class, hoping that continued revelation would come by Guru and Krishna's grace. So, Srimad Bhagavatam is considered supplementary Vedic literature because the original Veda is breathed out by Vishnu. And that's the eternal Veda. And it is at the beginning of the Kali Yuga, Vyasadeva, who is, we consider the author. Like when we chant in the morning, we offer our obeisances to Goddess Saraswati, the mother of learning. And Srila Vyasadeva, the author of the Bhagavatam. But Vyasadeva is the written author of the 4 Vedas, and he divides them into 4 to make it simple for the people in Kali Yuga. He does this all in Kali Yuga because previously to the Kali Yuga, people don't require the written script. The Brahmins can all remember it. It's passed from one Brahmin to the next. And the Brahmins speak it for the good of all society. And the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, they certainly do their share of learning, but their work takes them other places. So they learn other shastras like the the military shastra, the diplomacy shastras, all these different shastras dealing with administration of the state and the necessity of war. They had to learn all those things. And Vaishyas, of course, learn how to protect the cows and agriculture and mercantilism and banking and all these things. But the Brahmins specifically are meant for learning all the Vedic knowledge and especially the conclusion, and to assimilate it all and to actually gain practical experience of it. Not only to gain jnana, or the theoretical knowledge, but the vijnana, the wisdom of practical application and practical revelation, as opposed to actually not just be able to theoretically speak upon what they heard and recall it from their memory and teach it to others, but to gain a deep faith which develops into a bhav, or an ecstasy, a love for it, and that love actually bringing them personally into touch with Krishna, who sits within their heart, so that Krishna can guide them and teaching it to their audience. Because Krishna is in the heart of everyone in the audience, and he knows what people need, how they need it, what they need. So in this day and age, the Brahmins can't remember it just spoken. Certainly they would remember something, but it's all spoken in Sanskrit, so usually they have to teach them Sanskrit first. Then they start to learn the different shastras like that. So to make it easier, Vyasadeva broke it into 4, and he gave a fourth of it to 4 different disciples. And they each taught it to their disciples. And Vyasadeva, he had to give further. So the original Veda contains so many Upanishads, and all those Upanishads are there. And the Upanishads, they deal with the philosophical understanding of the absolute truth. The other Vedas contain rituals and hymns and mantras and how to perform yagas and all that, but the Upanishads deal with philosophical understanding. So all this had to be further elaborated upon for mankind's understanding. So then Vyasadeva gave Vedanta Sutra, which was to take all of that and just compact it into a smaller work of philosophical codes. Prabhupada quotes the very first sloka where he says Janma Yasha, and that is actually the very first sloka of the Srimad Bhagavatam as well. Janma Yasha Yataha, from whom does the absolute truth come? What is the original cause? And that is what is being searched out. So from the Vedanta Sutra, then he writes all these Puranas for people in different modes of nature. Puranas being considered like the ancient histories of how the universe came about, and what happened in the universe. How was it procreated, and how did we get different types of people? And then, what did they do? There were so many pastimes, and then all of a sudden there was these incarnations, and etc. All that is so much spoken in the Puranas. And then he gave something especially meant for the people in Kali Yuga, because even Vedanta Sutra would be very difficult except for those who were extremely scholarly and renounced from the world. So he had to give something for common man to make some advancements. So he wrote the greater history of ancient India, the Mahabharata, which he was a contemporary of, and actually he was not only like the writer, but he was also an actor in the play, because Vyasadeva appropriates some of the chief characteristics and chief characters in the whole history of the Mahabharata. Dhritarashtra, and Pandu, and Vidura, or his sons. So, but Vyasadeva still doesn't find satisfaction in his care to help the people in Kali Yuga by presenting the Vedic literature and writing so they can learn it, they can understand it, and they can hear it. So that's when Narada comes and explains to him that he has to more clearly, very concisely, clearly write the beautiful story of the personality of Godhead, which will include all of his devotees and their devotional service. That way people can understand what is the real essence of life, to become a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engage in devotional service. So when he does that, of course, he finds satisfaction. So that Bhagavatam has come down through the line of disciplic succession. It also was there before even Vyasadeva wrote it down, as we learned, because Brahma was sitting on the lotus when not understanding everything, when he heard the 4 verses of the Bhagavatam from Lord Krishna. And those verses were expanded when Vyasadeva spoke it to his wife, and Sukadeva Goswami heard it in the womb, and then Sukadeva Goswami expanded it when he taught it to Maharaj Parikshit. I don't know how much it was expanded by Sutta Goswami, who spoke it to the sages at Naimisharanya. But Vyasadeva, this is how he wrote it down in 18,000 Sanskrit verses. And those were elaborated upon, first of all, by Sridhar Swami, then by other acharyas, including Bhaktivinoda and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Vishwanath Chakravarti in the, I think, 18th century, 1700s. Down to Srila Prabhupada, who took all of those purports, because the purports of Sridhar Swami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta, they're all there. He studied those, and then he spoke a purport for the people in English. First time that was done, spoke it in English for the modern people to understand. Now this Bhagavatam is described here as Dasalachana, 10 characteristics. And that was explained in a particular book that I cannot remember the name, by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, where he describes each of these characteristics. And there's other authors also. I mean, you can just Google it and bring up the 10 characteristics of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Such as creation. At the beginning, how the Lord creates it all. Then the secondary creation, dealing with all the elements and how they evolve. There's also going to be how the universe is protected, and it evolves all the way to almost like the cantos of the Bhagavatam. So it evolves all the way to the 9th canto, if I'm not mistaken, liberation, and then finally Ashraya. Who is the ultimate shelter? Of course, we have an idea, because we're seeing creation from Vishnu. We're seeing how the universe is actually made, and then how it is protected, and we see the arrangements, the different manus, all taught about the different sections of time, and all of these things are taught. They're characteristics of the Bhagavatam, and it comes down to Krishna being described in the 10th canto. He is the ultimate shelter of everything. So Srila Prabhupada says, we are just trying to follow in the footsteps of the authority. Bhagavatam is not a fictional literature, it's not a mundane literature, and people have to understand it. And people, their understanding is based upon their modes. Like we say the Hare Krishna mantra, because by chanting Hare Krishna, everything can be revealed, but it requires a change in consciousness. So people have a different understanding according to their mode. And the thing is, the modes are very mixed, so there's like unlimited types of understanding people can have. But the idea is to become purer, because in the mode of goodness, one can have actually an enlightened understanding, a more realistic understanding, a purer understanding, which will bring him closer to the lotus feet of the Lord. So we can attain that by following the spiritual master, or Krishna's representative. The Brahmins, the spiritual master, they're trying to teach society. So when people come, we do our level best to involve them in understanding the absolute truth. But that is something that is not easy to understand. People can go to school and you pay some money and you have a regimented course, and you get some certificate if you pass the course, and you have some capability of teaching it yourself. So we do the same thing. We have many, many courses, in the ISKCON, higher education. You can, study like the devotees, even just studying online, learning the Bhagavad Gita, learning the Srimad Bhagavatam, learning all the other books like that. Or one can simply become a student, preferably when they're young, but at any time. And when one's a devotee, one is also a Brahmin and student. Because they can sit and learn, they can be engaged in Krishna's service on a daily basis. So Prabhupada's method of teaching was to make his books, but then how were they taught? It's like when a person does a fire yoga, usually they have to prepare themselves. So one prepares themselves by sadhana, which means they have woken up during the Brahma Muhurta hour or before that and cleansed themselves. And then they go through their routine of spiritual practice, from putting on tilak to coming to Mangalarti, or if they're the priest, till waking Krishna, and then taking care of Krishna. So one has to be prepared, and then from there, after performing all this, including sitting in meditation on Krishna, our method being the Japamala, then one can become qualified to perform the Agnihotra. So Prabhupada's method was that the students woke up early. They took a shower early. They put on tilak. They came clean to the temple. The modes are changing, because this brings one into the mode of goodness. Whereas otherwise, when this very same person, for example, tomorrow Krishna dies, a very nice devotee, but you put that same Tamal Krishna Das in a barroom and you give him a beer, and he drinks it, and his consciousness changes. He becomes different, a different person. Why do we think a different person? The soul is the same. Because the mentality becomes different. The modes change. We're affected by the modes. We cannot escape their influence. So when we associate with the mode of ignorance, we become ignorant. The same person becomes a different person. He says different things. He acts differently. So Srila Prabhupada, his rule was, we don't go to the ballroom. We don't drink beer. We don't take intoxication. Because you cannot learn the Bhagavatam like that. You'll always have an ignorant understanding, a tamasic understanding. We need to have a sattvic understanding, and That has to develop into pure love, the most loving understanding of the Bhagavatam. So then what do? We chant japa, we see the Lord being worshipped, we may worship the Lord, and then we worship the Guru, and then we sit down. Every day we study the Bhagavatam. Every day, and that's just in the morning. We're also supposed to study the Bhagavad Gita because that's the elementary part. One of the Dasa Lakshanams is the science of the soul. Because if we don't grasp that, then we remain on a bodily understanding. It's a very difficult understanding, and that's what Krishna first teaches in Bhagavad Gita. So by mastering Bhagavad Gita, we can understand the Bhagavatam. That the people in the Bhagavatam, so many of the main characters, they're not in the bodily conception of life. Like in our world, we can see people in bodily conception of life. What is going on? Black lives matter. All lives matter. Women's rights. Everything is on the bodily platform. There's no soul platform. People talk about the soul, but it's very difficult to understand. Some people never understand it. In our Western culture, we have some philosophy and some theology concerning it, but unless one comes some type of speculative scholar, you have some speculative understanding, but most people can't understand it at all because they don't undergo any rigorous academic understanding to understand it. They just hear it from their parents or they hear it in church, and they never really are able to grasp the meaning because it's only spoken. The soul goes to heaven and the soul goes to hell. And we understand that there's something that exists at death. There's so many complications concerning it. Some people say that the body somehow ever comes back together and rises up when one is blessed. And if one is not blessed, then, the soul continues to suffer. But there's the difference between body, mind, and soul is very hard to grasp in our Western culture. We constantly, most of the people, especially those who are not religious, they constantly cannot separate the mind from the brain and what to speak of the soul, the consciousness, also from the brain. They're thinking, like Prabhupada would say, that everything comes about by matter. But then Prabhupada would say, take whatever matter you want and make it. But they can't make it. But then they keep doing experiments with DNA and this and that. And they claim, look, we've made some of this and we've made some of that. But you can't make a soul. The soul exists. The soul is eternal. The soul has to be placed into a body by providence. Man, he has some ability to graft plants and to breed animals in such a way, or even people in such a way that you get certain types. But to actually make a person or to bring a soul into some body that you put together like a robot, that's a different thing. You have to have the blessings of providence, like Sukracharya. How could he bring the Asuras back to life when they were killed? Because he had some blessing. He had learned some science, spiritual science, of which took mantra chanting to bring the Asuras back to life. So there's some science about it that can be learned. But are they learning that science? They're filling around with it very seriously on a physical platform, just trying to figure it out. So how much they're able to figure it out, only God knows what destiny is, but it's highly doubtful that they'll get anywhere without possibly making our planet a most difficult place to live, a more difficult place to live. We see that it's the Sankirtan movement that will save the planet, and not modern science. Modern science's technological teachings. but it's the Sankirtan movement. So our Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, he wanted us to not just academically grasp, that's better than nothing, to theoretically understand and be able to repeat it, but he wanted us to get the practical experience of love of Godhead and become Krishna's good and for lack of word, deep devotee, someone who has a practical experience of the personality of Godhead. There's Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. He wanted us to actually become self-realized. Not just be able to say these things like sentences, but to gain practical experience of these things like him and be able to influence an audience to become devotees too. It's very difficult. People are more interested in their dharma, their occupation, and being able to live and enjoy in this world, which is actually the regular course of human life. They study, they get some job, they marry, and then in the Vedic concept at the end, we try to attain some salvation. But it's a practical course of life, even in the Vedas. That people, there's dharma, artha. Dharma is religious life and study, and artha is economic development, and kama, not karma, but kama, sense gratification, and finally moksha, liberation. But beyond all that is prema, pure love for Krishna. So that is what Lord Chaitanya and consequently Srila Prabhupada is trying to give. And that is found in the Bhagavatam. And he wanted us to be able to give all that. So how do we interest people, to go beyond just the ordinary human life and come to that place of prema for Krishna, become a devotee of Krishna? The devotees of our International Society for Krishna Consciousness are doing quite well. We have, more followers and more disciples, people who are seriously wanting to study. And then, despite whatever difficulties there are, the whole platform, in one sense, has changed. Because now we can't get people to even come physically, practically speaking. And we have to bring it to them over the internet, over broadband. And so it expands our school, in one sense. In a real sense, that now devotees have 2,000 and 3,000 people able to look, or maybe just 200 or 300, or maybe just 10 or 20. But the point is that now there's always an audience for the devotees. But we are in competition with the evil forces of Kali Yuga because the pornography industry has even a bigger audience. And so people are getting their intoxication like that. I don't know if they can get intoxication over the internet, but they'll have something to listen to and something to watch as they physically take their intoxication. And so we have to somehow ever reach all these people. It's very difficult, but we have to reach them and then speak in such a way that we can help them to become devotees. So it requires our purification, and that is found by, on a daily basis, continuing to do it. One day we'll transcend those demons that keep dragging us back from, actually perfecting our spiritual life. Because there's material life and spiritual life. And there's good material life and there's bad material life. I mean, that's the basis of religion. When it's not teaching love of God. Hey, if you're good, you're going to get good things. But if you're bad, you better watch out. Because there's no mercy. You're going to get the result. Not only at death, but karma pala. Even during this life, it's going to come back to bite you, whatever you do. You see people who you like, and they have their good side and they're friendly and this and that. And they drink something and they go out and they hurt somebody. And they end up in prison for 20 years. And then there, they don't improve a lot of times, most of the time even. They don't come out better. Some might, some who somehow ever learn, and they start to take life more seriously, but others come out even more corrupt and ruined than when they went in. So, we have to somehow ever reach people so they can, transcend this bad as well as the good even, and come to the higher stages where we can finally get that experience, that love, or that joy that comes when one actually reaches some spiritual ecstasy, and not just material ecstasy, where people, they're trying to find ecstasy in the mode of ignorance by taking so many drugs and intoxication because it's the ecstatic experience, so to speak. But higher than that is the spiritual ecstasy. The spiritual ecstasy. And those in the mode of goodness, they want some peace and quiet and mercy and love and, and friendship and all these things. But it's all temporary until they reach the spiritual side. And then it all becomes real. In relationship with Krishna, it all becomes real. We don't lose the personality, like the Buddhists might say, or the Mayavadis might say. No, the individual remains, but in a pure state where everything is eternal and absolute, and we're relating with Krishna. And we're there. It's not that we don't have friends, and it's not that we don't, have a life. But our life now evolves around Krishna instead of just revolving around our little bitty old infinitesimal selves. So that we can gather up from all the slokas of the Srimad Bhagavatam, as Prabhupada says. Whether it's the Chatur Slokya, the 4 original slokas, or whether it's 4 billion slokas, because our school, the line of disciplic succession, we don't change it. We don't change the original slokas. We don't change the Bhagavatam as it's handed down to us, but we give bhashya, or commentary. That's the job of a Brahmana. He has to give commentary for people to understand. Just like there were some devotees complaining, oh, Prabhupada's devotees wrote some Bhagavad Gita, that's so offensive. Why is it offensive? People have different ways of understanding. If they can't comment on Prabhupada's Gita, how will ever people learn? Prabhupada used to criticize. Look, they've been here for 30, 40 years and they have no new books. The same old books. No one's been able to write anything different. That's the duty of a Brahmin. He has to have the intelligence to be able to compose something for others to understand. So, our Kalakanta, he took Prabhupada's Gita and he put it into free verse, into poetry. He then changed it into where he calls it the rap Gita, for all these people that need to hear things like that in that type of language, in that type of way. And Hridayananda did a literal translation for the modern day Sanskrit scholars who want to see everything precisely, scholastically translated. And then, what's his name? Garuda Prabhu, put it into a mystical way for all the yogis out there, the world of yogis, so that they could gain an understanding of the Bhagavad Gita according to Prabhupada's Siddhanta, his philosophical conclusion of life. Oh, we're going way over time, so I'm going to stop now because of the time. I thank you for listening. And, whoever happens to see it on YouTube, thank you for listening. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare Krishna.
So tomorrow is number 45.